This is INCRadio, DZEM 954, the voice of truth, the official radio station of the Church of Christ or Iglesia ni Cristo.
The power.
Conversation.
It could change your whole life. INC Radio Chatline. Conversations that matter.
Hello, everyone who's tuning in and listening with us today here on another episode of Chatline, where we like to have conversations that matter. And the topic today, we hope that doesn't steer you away or deter you. It might sound heavy-handed at first, talking about regrets. There's a lot of things that I think we can potentially regret, and we'll navigate that conversation together. Not just me. I feel like if I just had a conversation about regret by myself, I would just cry the whole time. But thankfully, I'm not by myself. I have some good friends with me to talk about this from all over the world. I have my friend James, my friend EJ, my friend Arnie, and we're going to be talking about regret today. And we hope that you can talk about it with us as well by commenting down below there in the live chat or even in the comment section, and let us know your thoughts. I think we've all have experienced regret at least maybe once in our life. What does regret feel like to you guys? What is the feeling? What does it look like?
Honestly, when you said regret, it made me think of like this, like those things that you think of at like, like before you go to bed, before you go to sleep, the things you think of and you can just go, oh, right? It makes me think of
Staring at the ceiling, just like,
yeah, like
why
those
did I do
things,
that?
yeah, those things that you remember and you kind of go, oh, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Yeah. And it could be something that's like happened years ago, or maybe something that just happened that afternoon, right? And you just remember it and like, why did I do that? Or why did I say that? I feel
You
like
cringe at
that's,
yourself.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, that's what comes to mind when you said regrets.
You know, the first thing that came to my mind was no regrets. That was
if you know, you
Sorry.
know.
No regrets.
If you know, you know. Yeah, that's yeah, definitely a lot of different things that kind of make you, like what EJ said, the
Mhm.
face palm. I feel that way sometimes when I go to the gym and I'm like, why did I do leg day? This feels terrible. Feels terrible. And I feel that for a good like half hour. Or when I decided that I was gonna give up fast food for X amount of days and then I get that,
For me, it's
burger.
for me, it's eating ice cream while knowing I am 100% lactose intolerant.
Oh, that level of regret you definitely
No, shout
feel.
out to you guys. You guys, let me shout out to you, bro. That's so, oh, I respect people who do that because then honestly, you guys are living on the edge. That's no regrets at all. Like you want to be able to enjoy, I think, the delicacies of life, and I think doing so, even though you're lactose, man, shout out to you guys.
But you feel that later though, EJ, don't you?
That's the regret part. It's later on when when I feel them like, okay, maybe ice cream wasn't the best idea.
But there are things that you can I forgot what it's called. There's medicine that you can take. I know some people
Mm.
they do that. They're just like, you know what? I got my meds. I can handle it. And then it still somehow doesn't, I don't know, doesn't work out.
Yeah, or I could have just gotten like the dairy free kind, but no.
Arnie?
They don't taste the same.
Yeah,
You have to
yeah.
get
True.
the full ice cream for it to taste good.
True. Agree.
I think for me, like some of the regrets I have is being the cool aunt because then now my nephews expect things from me. And so one time we went to Hawaii and my nephew really wanted to jump off a cliff. And granted, he was only like 12 years old, I think, at the time. And my sisters wouldn't jump. Nobody would jump because no one's crazy enough, but auntie, please. And so I had to jump off a cliff.
Into water. It was like at the
Into
beach.
water.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
hope not
It's
to
funny you mentioned.
drown.
I think that
You know how to
some of
swim.
those or that means that reminds me of I don't I think there are some things I regret doing, but sometimes those regrets are the best type of memories. Like I remember this one time um in freshman year, it was so hot here in the Bay Area that for 3 weeks I think we were just hitting the pool for PE. And I don't know how to swim. So like the whole and it was our first semester. So it was supposed to be winter, but it was still so hot. And then I would be wearing like layers of clothes and everybody's being in swimming. I was like, man, I'd be walking around doing laps. And then I got to the point where I was like, you know what? One day I'm gonna just get into the water. So it was our last week. And then I was over at a shallow end. I'm only like 5'5", but in freshman year I was probably like 5'3". So there wasn't much water I could really be swimming in. And
Mm.
then I remember one of my friends was like, "Hey James, we got to hit the diving board at least one time." It's just me and him. We don't know how to swim. We were like, "We're gonna do it one time, just one time for the one time." And I was like, man, I don't know about that." And I remember he was like, "Man, we got to do it. This is our last chance to hit the water like this because we don't usually get to use the pool." And then yeah, we went in. He went in first. Went cannonball in, and it's a 13 deep pool. So 13 feet deep pool. And then he went in, I got up, and I was gonna bail, but then now it got to the point where all my classmates were kind of looking at me. They were like, "Oh man, he's gonna jump, he's gonna do it." And I went in. Oh man, the fight and flight in me was probably the highest it's ever been at that point in time. And then I got in, and I think I opened my eyes and I was around 6 feet. I was like, well, this is probably the deepest I'll get. If I don't start swimming, I'm probably gonna drown. I swim back up, I hit the surface, and I start waving. I'm like, yeah, I did it, but I didn't know how to swim, so I don't know how to tread water. So as I was like sinking like the Titanic, I was just like help, waving for people to come over. Um, and eventually somebody remembered that I couldn't swim. So they all jumped in, some of my friends. And we still talk about it to this day. I mean, honestly, that could have been bad, very bad, terrible. But out of all the stories that I remember from high school, that's still the one story that we go look back on and make jokes about. And yeah, it's definitely a regrettable action, but I do believe that is probably one of my memorable memories from high school.
I just want to speak
Is
on
it?
that. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, EJ. Go ahead.
No, because it makes me think of like the things that I do regret, like in high school. Like one of them, not signing up for like stuff like that. I regret not signing up for like the school play. I regret not signing up to join like the school bands. I wanted to, but there was always that fear in me, like not being able to like to measure up to like the other kids. Like looking back, that's the one thing I do regret not doing. Like and it just what James was saying. It reminded me of this what the teacher told us because there was I forget what it was, but there was a school activity. But for some reason, my class, me and my classmates, we didn't go to the school activity. We stayed in our classroom, waiting for our teacher, and I think he was on his way to that activity. He passed by our classroom and he saw us sitting there. He's like, "What are you guys doing here?" And like when we told him that we were waiting for a class, he kind of just told us, you guys could have just went, you guys could have just went to the activity, right? You didn't have to wait for me." And he told us something that I still think of to this day, and it like what James said reminded me of it. It's like you won't remember like every single day that you're here listening to the lesson, listening to what we teachers have to say, but you will remember that one day in high school when you got to play outside in the field, right? With with all the other kids in school. Like he'll say, like you'll remember those days where you got to watch the school play. He said he told us you won't remember the 100 days that you spent sitting on the classroom, but you will remember that one day where you did something else, you did something different. Right?
So
I,
that kind of begs the
I,
question too a little bit, like, um, because I didn't think of that aspect of regretting things that you did and then also regretting things that you didn't do, right? But would you guys still consider regret like as a negative thing? Do you consider it a negative, neutral, still
Mm,
somehow
no,
positive?
I think of regret as an emotion. It's not. It's not a positive or a negative thing. It's an emotion.
I think
I
I could
think if
build
you
off
have
that.
that
Oh,
fear of
Oh, go
missing
ahead.
out is more negative because you feel like you missed out on something because you didn't do something that you wanted to do but you didn't. But it could also be positive where jumping off the cliff, I never should have done it, I regretted it, but I actually had fun. You know what I'm saying? So I think it just depends on the situation.
I think, yeah,
Mm.
building off that, Arnie, that's actually was going to be my answer, was that I think it's a frame of mind, where regret is more so, like you said, it's actually two parts in my opinion. Fear of missing out, and the other end would be the discrepancy between your expectation of what a situation should have been versus
Mm.
what actually happened. So I think that's the two different sides to what I feel like would encompass a lot of what people feel when it comes to regret. So I don't necessarily believe it's a negative or a positive, but it's definitely would be dependent on what your frame of mind is on that specific event. Like Arnie said, like, yeah, it's a regrettable action jumping off a cliff and going off the diving board and almost drowning, but I did have an immense amount of fun. So it's really just depending on how you feel or how you are able to frame that in your mind, how you feel like time afterwards. And even like when, and it really also depends on how long it's been, right? Things that happened years ago would wouldn't feel as you wouldn't feel as strongly about the things you that happened then than you would a few months after, or maybe a few days after the things that happened.
I want to read Crest's comment. Thanks for tuning in with us. She put there, and this kind of leads into my next question about it as well, because EJ brought up that it's an emotion for him. Crest put there, what I regret differs in different stages in my life. The ones that sticks longer are most likely the ones that I haven't come to peace with yet. So when you think about regret, is it something that kind of lingers with you? Is it something that stays? And that's how you know that you're regretting something? Like, how do you know when you're regretting something? You kind of just feel it
mhm.
in your mind, in your
I
gut.
mean, just to bring up what I said earlier about regret being an emotion, that I didn't specify what I meant by that is that regret is like it's something that you can feel but also understand why it happens, right? Like let's say for example, I yell at someone, right? I was having a bad day, I yell at someone. Uh, the regret there is that, looking back, oh, I wish I didn't yell at someone. That's the regret. I wish I didn't yell at them. But then there's that understanding of, okay, I kind of understand a little bit about myself now. If I'm feeling this way, I should probably take a few deep breaths first before I try to talk to someone else. It's that's kind of like what I meant of like regret being like emotion, kind of like looking at it more objectively. Sorry about the background noises. And yeah, so yeah, that's what I meant by like regret being sort of like an emotion.
Oh, I like that. Actually, it's like, and I think somebody else also commented it, but being regret being a fuel that drives you to improve, things to look back on, things to,
Yeah, yeah,
I
it's
like
like
that. No,
wishing it didn't happen that way, but knowing why it happened that way.
you know
They're
what?
kind of
That
like
actually brings
yeah.
up. a question in my head where it's like, is regret something that um not only hold on, excuse me. I had it zoop through my brain.
I'll
No,
read
it's like
some comments while you're thinking about it, James. I just want to read more because it kind of relates to what you just said from Melanie. She said, if regret ends up crippling you and affecting your future decisions in a bad way, then it's negative." But her earlier one is more about it depends on basically the outcome of whatever happened and then what you do moving forward after that. So does that charge your memory at all in terms of, or Arnie, I saw you unmute.
Well, and then the other one that Renz was saying, sometimes that visits you from time to time, and your tongue click as you remember, yep, that was bad. So I think it's like that when it comes back, or I agree with what they said, where it's something that haunts you. Because it is something that's bothering you, you haven't made peace with it yet. But then, sometimes there are things that we regret in the moment, but eventually forget about it, or it doesn't bother us anymore because maybe we've made peace with it. And so I think that's what it is. I think if it's still bothering us, that's going to be like a lingering regret.
James, does that help at
okay,
all?
yeah, I think
Definitely.
yeah, no, definitely that did help. Oh my goodness, thank you so much. This was going to be my one of my regrets was not remembering my question 50 minutes from now. No, no, yeah, I think, is I think regret would be like Arnie said, she phrased it so perfectly. Um, it's like something, but it was the idea. What I mentioned was that it was the two sides of being FOMO and fear of missing out, and like things not happening exactly how you want it. It's the same way as saying that you're not at peace with it, right? If I may share, there was a time that I was in a relationship that I felt like took a lot out of me, right? Afterwards, when we broke up, and then I wasn't happy with myself, so it fueled me to improve. And years after, it's honestly up until probably like the last 2 years. It's probably been a little bit more over 7 or around 7 years ago since I had this relationship. But it was only after like a certain amount of time where I've become at peace with it that I no longer regret the relationship, but now think back of it as, oh, that was character development. I used it to kind of fuel my improvement. I can't hate the fact that it happened. I would never initially I was like, I wish this never happened. But now looking back, I'm like, I would love that it happened. And I could only say thank you to her because she helped me, even if indirectly, become a better person of myself, a better version of myself. But it took a long, long time to reconcile with that fact, and I was beating myself up quite a bit before that. But once you get over that nasty little dip, it becomes a thing that really you kind of look back on is that, wow, yeah, I regret some things from that, but I don't regret as much.
Yeah, there's like different. I feel like as we're speaking on this, there's different levels and different tiers of what regret can look like, right? It doesn't just fit into one single box, and everybody may experience it differently. And I love that you mentioned character development, James, because I feel like that's one of the ways that someone can come out of a situation, right? In terms of how they handled that regret, like being able to take that and like see it as an opportunity. Okay, this is not something that I'm happy with. I'm not satisfied with the outcome, but I'm going to find a way to turn it on its head and figure out how to navigate now that this is already done, because it's usually things that we can't take back, right? It's like, okay, and I'll give a good example, like what I think EJ was one who mentioned earlier. Let's say it's a conflict with someone that it's important to you. That's the stuff that gets to me like the most, is when you realize like you've hurt someone that like is really close to you, and you're like, I don't know how to undo this, but you try to figure out your way forward, and then
Mm.
it becomes this thing of how can I change as an individual? How can I change? And that's one of the ways that you can kind of handle something like regret afterwards. Do you
Because
guys
I
have?
feel like,
Go ahead.
oh, sorry. Yeah, because I feel like it's like you can always like for me, I know that I can always have that regret. Like with that example I gave of like yelling at someone, like say I yelled at someone, right? That's the example I gave earlier. And I can always regret that. If I look back at it, I can always say, yeah, that was a bad thing to do. Like I shouldn't have done that. But it's not to the point of like what I don't know whose comment it was, where you stop yourself from doing something. It's you sort of like you pivot the way you look at it as not as, oh, I yelled at someone, I'm such a bad person. That might be like the first few times. That might be what you're telling yourself, like I'm such a bad person. Why did I yell at someone?
The
Right?
critic. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
critic in your head.
But now switching it to, like when you feel like the emotions welling up and you're about to yell at someone, you remind yourself, remember that time you yelled at someone and then you regretted it afterwards? Then it becomes a lesson. You're like, okay, like you switch to, maybe you're telling them, okay, I'm sorry, I'm a little upset right now. Do you, like, would it be okay if if I take if I kind of step out for a little bit, take a few deep breaths and come back to this conversation because
Hmm.
I'm feeling upset. So that's, like you take that past regret to avoid doing something that you're gonna regret because of, like the similarities to a situation where you've regretted how you reacted before.
So that's a positive way to handle regret. That's
Hmm.
nice, EJ. Arnie, what are your thoughts? I saw you and me.
And to add on to that, EJ, yes, you realize you did something to them, but I think when we go in and try to fix it, because I mean, yes, I know you can hurt people and say things that are hurtful, but there you can also find ways to make amends where, whether you apologize or, make sure it doesn't happen again. And so I think when we make amends and we make peace with it, then I don't think it bothers us as much as if we don't make peace with it. And so I think that's why sometimes we have a lot of regrets, but I think some of those regrets are forgotten because we've made peace. But I think, like they said earlier, the ones that sticks to us are the ones that we still either have problems with or things that we haven't made peace with yet.
Have you guys ever handled regret badly? James, you can sit on that thought, and then I don't know what answer you were gonna come up with, James, but that's my next question: is if you've ever handled it badly.
Okay, I'm actually gonna just follow up on Arnie and answer that question while I'm at it. Yeah, no, definitely since we are on the topic of kind of how to deal with regret positively, right? Arnie, you're the best. Honestly, I love how you phrase things because it just things that line up with everything I believe in. Yeah, no, the lingering regrets are the things that are unresolved. So what I do now, and having coming from that situation where I would always beat myself up and remember things and be like, ooh, like there was there. It got to the point where I'd be driving and I would just like, ooh, I would verbally speak. I was like, ooh, I hate that I did that. You know. Now, what I do now is that if there is anything that I do that I feel like would bother me later on, and is that I would double down and kind of just address it then and there. Right. I think regret is like a seed that festers over time. And then when it blooms is when it still affects you, right? It's like a thorn that keeps thorning. So how I do is that anything in regard, it could this like you said, and Tony, is that it's levels to it, right? If it's a small issue, a big issue, it'll still bite you little by little. Now I go about it is that if there's any point in time that there is like a, a thing that I want to do, like instead of being fear of missing out, maybe I'll do it, right? I'll make a way to happen to do it so that I'm true to what I feel like would make me happiest. And I think that has helped me so much more that I find this fulfillment now in my life, especially this year. It's been a great year for me. Not because of the things that happened in it, but because I've done things that had allowed me to grow and learn from the things that have happened. Um, Tony, I'll be real with you. I completely forgot your question.
If there's ever ways that you've dealt with regret badly.
Terrible bad ways, like bad ways. Yeah,
Not
girl, I
not
ate.
necessarily
I
like
ate a
what you
lot.
did, but like, oh, you ate a like just
Girl, I ate. I was 120 in high school. I am 190 right now. Not to say none of it, not all of it is like, but I worked out a lot, but at the same time, I did eat a lot more. And there's different coping mechanisms to it, I believe. But yeah, no, definitely I ate and I found but there's also positive things I did. I started working out. I started finding hobbies, started thinking of things to do that kind of enrich my life. Going picking up an instrument. Not all the things that I did that I believe that stemmed from regret were negative. I think for the most part they've been positive. But you know, I also learned how to not beat myself up, like somebody had mentioned in the comments. Treat yourself nice, even if that means like two bowls of ramen or like two bowls of pho. Take yourself out. Absolutely.
I don't think I could do that. I can't even finish like one bowl of ramen by myself. But yeah, I guess there's like coping. I feel like that's another way that we can think of that is like the different ways that we cope with regret because it takes a while sometimes depending on what it is, right? To kind of come to peace with it like what Arnie was saying earlier because that's what you're kind of aiming for, right? Is you're trying to get to a point where you acknowledge that it happened and then you're trying to get to some level of peace in terms of how you're trying to handle it. Yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the one.
I saw you unmute, EJ. What are you
Yeah,
saying?
like this when you mentioned like the like a bad way that I dealt with, like with regrets. Before it made me think of like the time when I don't like up to this day I don't know if I can explain why my mindset before was that if I if I hated myself more than everyone else, then it somehow makes up for like the action that I regretted doing. If I punish myself more than what anyone would do realistically, how anyone would punish me realistically for this regrettable action that I did. I feel like if I, like what's another word for it? You know, if I over deliver it, then somehow it makes up for it. It makes amends. But no, that's not the right way to deal with it, right? We've been talking about it earlier. It's about taking that lesson from that regrettable action. It's not supposed to be something that, okay, you did something bad, you have to punish yourself really badly for it. you know and that's how I handled it before. Because before I thought that that's how you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to, like, uh, I thought that if I punish myself more than anyone would want to, then it makes amends to it makes amends to whatever regrettable action I did. But it doesn't. you know it doesn't. And at the end of the day, I think it's just like a selfish desire as well to well, what's the right word for, like, to pay for it. To pay for
Atoning. You're
the
trying to
action,
atone.
to
You're trying
atone,
to
yeah, to
atone
atone
for
for it.
what
Yeah,
we think that
yeah,
that's the thing that's going to resolve it,
yeah.
but then it's not.
It's
Arnie, you
not.
look so ready to speak.
I know. I saw
I'm
her.
interested.
Sorry.
Like like for me, sometimes I don't know if it's actually a negative, I mean, like a bad way to handle regret or not, but there was a time where things didn't work out with somebody, and so I felt like I wasted my whole life on them and all that stuff, something I totally regretted, right? So I ended up going on a shopping spree. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, it was a good thing because I got new clothes. It was bad because it wasn't healthy for my bank account, but sometimes you got to do things to make yourself feel better. And so, like I said, I don't know if it's good, I don't know if it's bad, but it's the stuff I do.
Well, Arnie, there's a saying: they print money every day. So don't worry,
Wait,
you'll financially recover from this somehow.
I love
Yeah,
that. I'm
they
gonna
print
use
money
that,
all the
EJ.
time, but they print money all the time, but it's not in my pocket.
EJ, you don't understand how much I'll be using that from now on. They'll make more money
I'm glad. I'm glad.
enabling me,
But don't
bro.
worry, you'll financially recover from this. Just please, please be
It seems like we're
responsible
on a
with
path
your.
to more regrets. This seems like an opening
No, no,
towards
no.
more.
I do want to say disclaimer. Disclaimer. Please be responsible with your expenses. Okay. Don't take what I said out of context. Please be responsible with your expenses, though.
And Nate had typed something in the chat and he says he sometimes regrets buying a few things. And I think that's where I have a lot of my regret is when I go, because I'm like a compulsive shopper where I don't think about it. If I think I want it, I just get it. I don't mull it over and like others were saying before, like put it in your cart and wait to see if you really want it. I'm just gonna buy it. And then later on, I'm like, oh, why did I buy this?
But do you regret it and then you return it, or do you still keep it? Do you still keep the purchase, Barney?
No, I just keep it. I don't do
Really?
the whole
Really?
returning thing. I think it's too much of a hassle. Yeah. I just keep it and then I make sure I
Really?
use it a lot so that I don't regret that I bought it.
Is
The
there a
best.
recent
I'm just gonna
purchase
say
that
that,
you would like
Arnie.
to share? Sorry, go ahead, James. Go ahead, James.
No, I was just saying Arnie's the best. Arnie's exactly what I would think if my brain was a living person. Like that's
Yeah, I feel like it's interesting. Things that hold a lot of value. I feel like we kind of mentioned it earlier. Things involving like time, like money. I would say is some of the lightly touched on just now. Opportunity. I guess that's with time, and then relationships because we're like that's very something close to home. I feel like those are like kind of key points where regret can kind of surface and then you know come up and down. So, is there any regret that you guys have been able to turn around? Like you were, I don't want to say, because for me, I feel like I've had different regrets when it comes to different parts of my life. Like I totally relate with what EJ said about the high school stuff. Like what, I wish that I joined band. That was like one of my regrets in high school. Like I wish I did because I love music. And then just different opportunities. I feel like I wish that I did it, that I did it, that I didn't do. Like I wish I took that job. But then you kind of like step back and then you think to yourself, well, you know, those things also happen for a reason, right? So is there like things, lessons that you've taken out of stuff that you guys have regretted in the moment, but then later on, because I think it was Melanie who put that in the live chat earlier, like hindsight is 2020. And there are a lot of things that you can kind of you're like, oh, that's why that had to happen after it happened. That kind of thing.
Mhm. I'm gonna let Arnie say her stories because I saw her on mute.
So for me, one of the things I regretted before, but I don't regret now, was after high school, I decided to take time off, to be able to travel and kind of live life before going to college. And at the time, I was okay with it. And then as I was getting older and I'm like, I need a college degree of some kind, then I kind of regretted it because then going back to college would have been a little bit harder because now it's harder for me to learn and everything. And then so the whole time I was in college when everyone else from high school had already finished college, I think I was regretting that. But then now to think of it, I don't have regrets on it only because I realized I was more mature when I went into college, so I actually took it more seriously and I appreciated it more. Because I think if I would have went straight out of high school, I was just doing it because it's what my parents were expecting from me. But when I had taken a leave and then did it on my own, then I knew I was going to college because I wanted to, not because my parents kept bugging me to go to college. So then that's how, like I said, at first it was a regret, but now I'm like, no, I'm okay because I mean I got my degree and everything and I finished everything I wanted to accomplish a little bit later in life, but at least I still got to do it.
Do you think that had to do like the initial feeling of regret? Was that because of external factors more than how you actually felt about it, Arnie?
I mean, for me, I think it wasn't really. I mean, it wasn't really external factors. I was stubborn when I was in. I probably am still stubborn. No, but my parents wanted me to go a certain path, and I didn't want to do that. And so, to get back at them, I decided, well, I'm not going to go to college because they expect me to go to college because out of all my siblings, I was the one who was going to go to college. And so, I think because I was just so upset with the path they wanted me to take and they wouldn't let me take the path I wanted to take, I said, well, I'm just not going to go to school then. And then so eventually later on, I started to realize where, you know what, I want to go to college, not just because my parents want me to go, is because I really want to go. And so that's kind of why I ended up going. So the regret, I think, was just that I didn't do it earlier because then I could have finished earlier like everybody else. But like I said, I was okay with it after the fact because one, it got me a full ride. And two, I was able to, get it done and do what I need to do.
Do you guys, are you particular who you share your regrets with? Like, I know regretting the pizza, the whole pizza, like that's not as that's not
Yeah,
as
I was gonna
embarrassing
say it
to share.
depends because you mentioned
Yeah,
levels earlier. It
yeah,
depends what level of regret are we talking about here that I'm
yeah.
uh that I'll be
Any
comfortable to share, right? With
any level, like what, like who do you share your regrets with?
I've
You
only
know
shared
what?
it with
It
our
was
chat line. Like nobody knows,
Public,
nobody knows my
only public
regrets.
forum, only public
It's
forum
like
is acceptable.
so like I don't talk because I don't tell people my problems and I don't expect, because like I help everybody else with their problems. I don't want to burden anybody else with mine. So I don't tell people about my regrets. So the only time people know about my regrets is when you ask me on radio.
No,
yes,
with Arnott's
I like
level.
that.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, no, no. Once upon a time, I would say, I was a little bit more recluse with what I thought and what I would say. I wouldn't let anyone know really if there was things I was going thinking about in a sense. But I guess now the only well before it was this like I would tell one person and it had to be my best homie at that time. Um, but sometimes it would be the opposite. Sometimes it'd be things I can't even tell my best homies. And it would just be a random stranger. Like, somebody I would chop it up with for a 5-minute session get so deep that you offload. And sometimes it's hard to share with people that are close to you and because it's a little bit more personal. They know you, they know how you live and with and how this may I believe it stems from the the fear of your image changing in their eyes. So for me, it was I never shared my life to people, and this was when I was younger, to people that knew me, and it would only be people that knew me at a surface level that would know me that I was going through things, up until I got to the point where I would figure out a way more healthier ways to cope with my regrets, right? And I started thinking about more bettering myself and kind of just developing my character and becoming a better person. Then that's when I started becoming more of a an open sharer. And at maybe one point in time, I would never have um, said things on radio, but now here I am.
I love that you mentioned that, James, just because one of the ways to kind of handle regret is to really find those people that you can talk to and they accept you, like, as you are. And that's one of the things that my best friend in the whole world, I love her to death. She always tells me that all the time. She says that getting emotional thinking about it. She told me, um, nothing you tell me will ever change my opinion of you. And it's nice to be able to have people like that in your circle where even through your mistakes, right? Because if we look at the heavier side of in terms of regret, we can look at it as different mistakes that we've made. um they can kind of be there to work with you through it and be like, yeah, it happened, but we can work through it together, and being able to see you through the overcome and all of that. So yeah, find good people. Find good people, guys. Everyone who's listening to this broadcast, it's important. I think that's important in terms of, especially with recovery of different things, being able to be surrounded with the right kind of people who will champion you out of those situations. So yeah, shout out to the people that we love in our different circles who support us. Sorry, I'm sentimental, guys. I had to insert that one in real quick before we get deeper in this conversation, because it matters. That for sure matters, and I'm glad that James brought that up. That's kind of why I wanted to ask who you guys share your regrets with, because it's not
It,
easy to do.
it does make me think of like what you guys have been saying. It does make me think of like how more careful now of like who I share it with, especially if I know that, oh, this person can deduce who I'm talking about. Because like with what you mentioned earlier about like how I think it was James who mentioned that sometimes you're worried about how it might change how how they see you. I'm worried as well about like if I share like something with that, let's say it involves someone else, if I know that the person I'm telling it to can deduce who I'm talking about, it makes me worry too about, well, how will it change how they see that other person. Because speaking of regrets, that's one thing that I've regretted before. Like oversharing like a situation between another friend to another friend, and they were able to deduce who I was talking about, and seeing their dynamic change because of what I said. You know, like it's something that that I regret, because it makes me think of like, oh, I should have been more careful about who I told that to. But they were both close friends that I would trust with anything, you know. But at that time, even if I trusted both of them so much, I shouldn't have said anything to that friend, to the other friend, because he was able to deduce who I was talking about. Even if I didn't mention any names, he was able to deduce who it was, and it changed their dynamic. Yeah. I don't know if they still talk, but yeah, I know that it's something that I regret. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of different things coming up in today's conversation. Different levels. Arnie's, she has shopping things. EJ's, has been talking about different relationships. And James, I just had this image of you jumping into the pool, not knowing how to swim. It's I feel like it happens. I think it was Arnie who said it earlier. It happens more than we think. I feel like we have these like moments of it, right? That like these blips of like, oh, why did I do that? And it can be something that lasts only a little bit, but then there can be something that lasts for years sometimes, right? You hear people talk about it, like at the end of their life, like, oh, what are things that you regret? I wish I spent more time with family. I wish I wasn't so hard on myself. Like I always see stuff like that on social media, on reels of people who would go to like nursing homes and talk to some of the elderly, and they share stuff like that they regret. Um, but what I do want to ask all of you, how has regret, we it can be seen as something that's negative, right? But how has it brought value to your life? Like, how has it changed your life?
I would say my biggest regret was it was the catalyst for my biggest moments of growth. Um, the relationship that I had mentioned earlier in this broadcast was at a period of time where I was shifting from young adolescence to a young adult, right? Um, and then I was kind of getting into and I believe it was mentioned in the chat as well, is that it was the one that spurred all that character development in me. Um, it allowed me to understand and kind of come into terms where I'm at, right, in life. It brought into light the flaws that I had as a character, my deficiencies, and the things that I could work on, but it wasn't easy to accept. It highlights the negative portions of our life, but how we relate to it and how we view it is solely dependent on how we're able to kind of shift our mindset, right? And no matter how long it takes, right? And I believe Arnie and even Nate had mentioned it. I think the moment we get to the point in our life where we're now thinking about things that, let's reconcile all these loose ends, right? Life becomes so much more fulfilling. I think that's the lesson that I learned going through that period of time to now, is that now just acting in response to the things that I believe to be correct, um, and now pursuing it with utmost um, like certainty. Like I strive to live every day without any regrets. Not in to say it won't happen, but in a sense that every action I take was intentional, right? That everything that I am gonna do and then decide on was something that I had thought about, decided, and acted upon, and will accept any outcome regardless of what it may be. Because then I can tell myself years from now that I did that, even if the outcome isn't something that I wanted, or was counter to what I was expecting. I can tell myself that I I still committed to that action, or to whatever that is, right? I can live with the consequence. I can live with the outcome, and it's no longer something that I can regret, because I gave it my 100%. I gave it my thought. Um, I gave it my, everything that I could possibly do at that point in time, and I can walk away with it, with it, with no loose ends. And I think that has made me such a incredible um, change in my life.
I feel like summary, it's like self-awareness. Just want to add that. I saw you ready to speak, Arnie. It sounds like a lot of self-awareness. So that props to you, James, for having that, for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's, you learn from your regrets. And for me, I also learn from other people's regrets. Like you were saying earlier, how some people, when they're older, they regret not spending time with their family or doing certain things. And so when I hear that from other people, it makes me try to reflect on what I'm doing. And so then it makes me conscious of where, oh, I still have life. I still have strength. I should go do all these things that people are regretting. Because when I get older, that's something that I don't want to regret. So I think when you try to analyze everything and see what everyone else regrets or what you have regretted in the past, then it will help you change. Like for me before, I never used to spend money on myself. I'll buy everything for my nephews, my sisters and everything, but I would never do it for myself because I'm like, why am I going to waste money? But now I'm coming to the point where, hey, if I'm able to spend on everybody, why can't I spend it on myself? I'm the one who worked hard. I'm the one who did all this stuff. And so, because the last thing I want to do is have that regret when you're ready to die, like, oh, look, I made all this money and I didn't even spend it on myself, So I think learning from others, but also analyzing what you're going through and making the changes now before you regret it even more later in life.
Can I just say, like, from like when you're like with your question, it made me think of this, and listening to what everyone was saying too gave me like ideas about like how I see regrets. I think for me, regret is something that can be permanent, but it doesn't have to be negative. Like with the example I gave earlier, like I'll always regret yelling at someone. That will like there will never be a time where I'll look at that and say that I didn't regret that because I learned something. I still, I would like, matter like 5 minutes from now or 50 years from now, looking back at that, I would still say that, yeah, I still regret, yelling at someone. But even if I regret that, I would still I still have that understanding, that lesson that I took from it, and like how I applied it, to like my life. So I think that's the thing with me. It's like regret can be permanent, but it doesn't have to be negative, And I feel like with what we've been talking about, since earlier, is that regret is something that we'll always have. You either regret doing it or you regret not doing it. So learn to live with regrets because you're gonna have a lot of them. You're either gonna regret doing something or you're gonna regret not doing something. You're gonna regret you're gonna regret going down the left path, or you're gonna regret or hold on, let me rephrase. You went through the left path, you're gonna regret not going through the right path because you don't know, you're like, oh, I don't know what this could have been, the what if, or you're gonna regret going through the through the right path because you're like, oh, I don't know what this could have been if I went this way. Like with each choice, there's gonna be a consequence, of course. There's gonna be something that you're gonna miss out on, you know. So you're gonna have to live with a lot of regrets. But don't look at regrets as like a negative thing. I think of regrets as sort of like a check up on what you value, right? At the moment, right? Maybe you'll choose something out of an obligation, but you can still feel that regret of like, oh, like I know I did this out of obligation, but I do feel bad that I didn't spend that time with my family, you know like that's you have that regret, but you have that understanding. It's not something that's gonna bother you your entire life. You're s- like you can have that regret, but you can have that understanding as well. you know and I hope I'm making sense for you. I feel like I
Oh,
went
you do. You are, EJ. It makes me think of the way that you phrase that of regret being something that is an emotion, but something that you can also understand. In the same way that, like, I can't think of a good comparison to it, but like, let's say for myself, um I agree with James in the same way that um regret helps you be more intentional. It's like a reminder for you in a roundabout way, like, oh, that thing happened, I wish it didn't, but this is what I can do differently moving forward. Like, my thing has always been, like, when I experience loss and I think about the relationship that I had with that person that I lost, I tend to evaluate, well, what did I not do with them that I would want to do more with the next person now, right? The regret still stays with me, right? In the way that you said that it's not something that can always disappear, but it's not something that has to be negative, or it doesn't have to stay negative, right?
Mm.
It's how you handle it, just like with anything else in life. The outcome, the final outcome of it is always going to be up to you and how you change and you handle things in the aftermath. So regret can bring positivity into your life by the way that you deal with it. Whether you choose to look at a terrifying memory back then as something that's, a funny story to tell now, like that's totally up to you. That is your choice, and how
Yeah.
you can execute it and deal with it. So for everyone who's watching, we hope that in today's broadcast you have felt not just your regrets, but it that they're not something to be to, like what EJ said earlier, to hold over your head as something that you label yourself as that regret forever, right? And these are different things that happen at different levels that we can always learn from. We can learn from about ourselves, have the character development, you know, self-correct, like with Arnie. If you got shopping issues, then maybe you gotta figure some things out. No judgment, no judgment, Arnie. I promise, no judgment. Just citing the example, because it things happen, right? But what matters is what we do after, is what we do after in the wake of all these different things that we may be feeling, or choices that we've made. So thank you to everyone who's been in the live chat. There was so much interaction there with the sharing from everyone. Thank you to Crust, to Renz, to I saw Flo there earlier in the live chat as well. And I'm sorry if I miss any names. Nate was there with a Melanie. Thank you so much for tuning in with us and sharing your thoughts. We hope that this has been a conversation that has mattered to all of you, and we hope that you continue to support INC Radio Chatline every Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern Time, and then please convert for all the other times around the world, because we are international. So for more conversations that matter, tune in with us again next time. Tony Rose Valenzuela with my friends EJ, Arnie, and James. Thanks everyone for being with us. We'll see you next time. Bye. Thank you, everyone. No regrets. Some regrets, but we managed them.
No regrets.
Some regrets. Johnny.
This is what I ask. Let me always dwell in the temple of the Lord till I breathe my last.
This is INC Radio, DZEM 954, the voice of truth, the official radio station of the Church of Christ, or Iglesia ni Cristo.